Resistance is usually subscribed to bodies at rest, an impulse to those in motion, but motion and rest, as commonly conceived, are only relatively distinguished, nor are those bodies always truly at rest, which commonly they are taken to be so. Sir Isaac Newton of Woolsforth. To seek and brawl. Samantha screamed in frustration. "I'm so dead! I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead!" She slammed her head into the library table and wept into her open textbook. Team 3 of Class J was studying for the midterms just before Thanksgiving break, and tensions were high, though only due to one notable outlier. "Sammy," Alice tried to calm her, "it's not a big deal." "Yeah, it's just midterms," Abraham joined with much less care. "You don't understand." Samantha lifted in a plea for sympathy. "I'm Jewish. My parents are expecting perfect grades across the board. They'll probably kill me if I get any less than a 50. Or worse, ship me upstate to my grandparents." "You know, Samantha," I spoke up from where I stood in my chair, "my parents have also set fairly high expectations for me. I understand how daunting such pressure can be, but I'm sure you'll find yourself in a favorable situation if you just keep up the effort." "Yeah, Samuel is right, Sammy," Amanda said with an endearing smile. "You just gotta keep up the studying." "But I've been studying," Samantha whined. "How much more studying can I do?" "You could reallocate some of the time you spend flirting with boys into studying more," said Jerry with a smirk. "I would rather move upstate," was Samantha's response. She sighed with gloom and pouted as she placed her head in her hands. "Maybe I could talk them into just disowning me." The table seemed to have given up as a whole at encouraging her. We all just allowed her to wallow in her misery for the moment. Except for Brick, who scratched his head before asking, "How can they disown you? People can't own other people." "Indeed," I said, "we can't allow ourselves to lose even one member of our team. Perhaps we can use a quality over quantity approach." "How so?" Amanda asked. "Use my powers to predict the questions and study for that?" "No, I meant direct one-on-one tutoring with me," I offered. "I am the most qualified to educate here. Come over to my house. I can even set up teaching aids." "Really?" Samantha shot up with a smile. "You would do that?" "Of course. I said I would, didn't I?" I restated. "Wow, Samuel," Amanda purred. "Most boys actually take her on a date before trying to take her home." "I guess they didn't have the same skill as me," I posed with my full undersized body. "Agreed," Samantha smiled. "This will be the first time I've been to a boy's house, and a cute one, too." Amanda and Samantha giggled while the others smirked or sighed. I interrupted them. "I would say to save the flirting for after exam week, but I believe we've already reviewed that, so I won't bother dissuading you. We'll start tomorrow at noon. Now, unless there's anything else, I believe we've maximized our utility of this study section. Jerry, would you call a dismissal?" "Yeah, we've worked hard enough, team. Time to relax before the big day." Jerry stood, closing the books in front of him. "We'll do our best, and that'll be that." The rest of the team agreed, and we all took our leave. I opted to fly back to my home, as it was easily the furthest away. I circled around to the balcony that was attached to my room, a modification made as a birthday present, after I mastered the art of flying when I was 7. The apartment building I lived in was owned by my family. It had been ever since my forefather, Thomas York, bought it from his no longer master soon after slavery was outright abolished over 2 centuries ago. So my father only needed city approval, which was easy with the aid of the DDH. I disengaged the jet propulsion as low as I could to limit the shock to my short legs and walked into my room. A cross between a rocket engineering office, a supervillain lair, and a typical teenage dwelling. My room was a scattering of honed chaos. Diagrams, equations, and blueprints in neat pen, scratched pencil, or crude chalk lined the walls, in between various media posters. The floor was filled by a large wall-to-wall work desk on the opposite side to the balcony opening. A corner had a floor-to-ceiling server tower, and the last corner a crib-sized bed I had custom-made under a reinforced tower of drawers for clothing. The center space of my room had a scattering of loose wiring, tools that were forgotten until needed, and clothes that were just forgotten. In short, a pigsty, if pigs understood advanced theoretical physics. I have a lot of cleaning to do, I noted to myself. This was not an acceptable place to bring Samantha for our study session. This was inconducive to a learning environment, on top of being a bad first impression for a pretty girl. I set my pack down and removed the rest of my equipment. As lightweight as I tried to build my equipment, it was still a relief to shed the extra mass. Feeling paradoxically lighter and heavier due to losing the majority of my external mobility gear, I walked into the hall and down to the living room to find my younger sisters, Liberty York and the younger Justice York, watching the television. I assumedly heard my mother, Carol York, in the kitchen cooking. "Hi, Samuel," Liberty greeted. "How many times could the Earth fit into the sun?" "Justice says under 1,000,000, but I say over 1,000,000,000. "Well, the Earth itself could only fit into the sun once, since it's only one object," I answered, and as they rolled their eyes, I continued. "However, the volume of the sun is a little bit under 1.5 million times that of Earth. So you're both missed that estimate." "I was closer," Justice said with a smirk. Liberty looked back with a scowl and a tongue out, causing Justice to make a face in return. Sensing a sister fight, I cut in. "Where's Dad and the other boys?" "They're down fixing stuff in the building," Liberty answered. "Someone flushed something that broke the piping." "I see," I said, walking into the kitchen to find my assumption of my mother cooking to be correct. "Maybe I should go help them. I am old enough to be helping." "Oh, don't worry about that. They'll have it fixed soon enough," my mom said as she chopped different ingredients. "If you want, you can help me." "That sounds like a good alternative," I said, and pulled a stepladder out. One disinfecting later, I was slicing root vegetables with clean precision. As the television played in the background, Mom and I worked. When I had a sizable pile chopped up, I asked a question. "Would it be okay if I skipped church tomorrow?" "What? What for?" my mom asked back. We had been goers for my whole life, and while I invested little past the good teachings, I never opposed my family's faith. My mother was more curious than concerned. So I explained. I promised a classmate a study session. However, I was running the numbers, and I concluded I would need a greater amount of time than just after dinner. I have to both set up the resources for the session, as well as clean my room. "Oh, well, if you're going to get that room of yours clean, then that's enough for me." My mother smiled and continued to ask, "What's your classmate's name?" "Samantha Von Beck," I asked as I would any question. "She'll be coming at noon." "A girl?" my mother snapped. "You invited a girl over? Is she pretty?" "Yes, we're teammates, and I believe she's rather attractive." I tried to answer neutrally to undo any assumptions made. Just then the front door opened, and my father's baritone voice called out, "We're home!" "Moses, Samuel has a girlfriend," my mother called back, my response seemingly failing to dissuade her. "He's bringing her over tomorrow for lunch." "Really now?" My father came into the kitchen followed by all three of my older brothers. Moses York the Fifth, who we called Junior, Jackson York, and William York. "Well, why haven't we heard about this girl before?" "Probably because she has to push him around in a stroller." William laughed, as he came into range to scoop me into a noogie. Only a year older, but over a head taller. Ribbings like this were fairly common for him. Actually, it's because we're just friends, and teammates, and of course classmates as well, I explained through the harassment. What's her name? Dad asked, and Mom answered him. He rubbed his chin as he repeated every syllable. Samantha Von Beck. That sounds like a white name. I believe she's German, I provided. Also Jewish. You're dating a Jewish girl? Jackson, 4 years older and 2 heads taller, shattered my hopes of setting the record straight. Crazy. Not at all. Mom waved off the comment. You kids can be with whoever you want, so long as I get grandbabies. I'm already getting you one, Mama, Junior said, 6 years older, and already moved out to another apartment with his own wife. Remember? Of course she remembers, Dad said and smiled. She's just impatient. Moses, really? Mom put her hands on her hips and scowled. How old were we when we had Junior? 19, but we were dating for over 5 years, and I've waited over 20 for grandkids. And I put up with you every day. Dad boomed out in laughter. Yes, you do. Guess you win this one. Dad held his arm out, never crossing the line over to the kitchen because dirty shoes were not allowed in the kitchen, and Mom had to step over to him so he could lean over and kiss her. Go wash up, and Samuel, you set the table. Mom instructed, and we followed. Except Junior, who said his farewells, and left to his own home down the hall. Hey, William, Jackson giggled in whisper, so only we 3 heard. With Samuel getting a girlfriend, that leaves only you to be the gay uncle. Nuh-uh, William protested. You don't have a girlfriend either. So you're the gay uncle. I had girlfriends before, Jackson logically countered. So it's you. Nuh-uh, William tried again. Uh-huh, Jackson countered again. The two of them continued their passionate discussion of probability and statistics as we set the table and prepared for dinner. After dinner, everyone bathed and ready for bed. I spent the evening cleaning the bulk of my room, setting laundry aside for the morning and securing any loose bits before laying down for bed. Morning was active as any Sunday morning, and though I was excused from attending church that morning, I did my part of the weekly routine, which was mostly keeping track of the schedule. The boys shaved and dressed, and Mom did hers and the girls' hair. As they ready to go, Mom turned to me. Okay, we're going to try to be back as soon as we can, so I can make a big lunch for you and Samantha. She sang her name, and I resisted an eye roll. Thank you, Mama. I'm sure she'll appreciate it, I said. Just be sure it's kosher. I don't want to offend her. Oh yes, I need to find out what kosher is, Mom said and left. Hopefully she would take some time to learn that we could already make a kosher meal and give me just enough extra time to finish prepping. Closing the door and leaving me alone, I started the rest of my preparations by starting my laundry and setting a timer. Then I went to my now uncanny room and up to my work desk to work on resource gathering and presentation. Monday was the history exam with our homeroom teacher, Mr. Galacto, the impossibly powerful super being who had spontaneously decided to teach freshman history. Our lessons had been over a broad range of topics, but a fair amount was about the more recent spats of international violence within the 20th century. Thus, the international conflict. A 3-decade-long series of war and destruction that nearly destroyed the world. From it came the Peace Day Treaty, a massive and nearly incomprehensible text that set the rules of the world and how to deal with future conflicts, both major and minor. It was most notable for having officially acknowledged the existence of demi-humans and other beings as legal entities on an international scale. Without it, the world would be doomed, even as imperfect as it would prove itself later. Next was the Horde invasion. Only a few years long, it made up for the shorter time scale of violence by being incredibly dense with destruction. The invasion started with a shock and awe attack, sending warships and landing horde troops before anyone even detected the existence of extraterrestrial ships. The entire first wave of the horde's attack, from entering our solar system to being beaten off, took only an hour to be done, and we only managed to fight them off because not one section of the planet was unprepared. Armed to the teeth and paranoid that the peace would break any moment, every nation turned their weapons to the invaders. After that, mankind was fairly united. But that didn't stop trouble from arising again. Now, with the world more agreeable between nations, a new set of problems arose. Problems between different classification of demi-humans and other beings. Namely around mutants, such as myself, and our place in the world. For so long, mutants were kicked off as an exotic class, unwelcome under any flag. Clearly not mundane, but also not anything else. Mutants were the recipient of intolerable discrimination, leading up to the establishment of the Brotherhood of Mutants, and the start of the Mutant Revolt. Or revolution, if you're a political figure. I knew the most about the Mutant Revolt. Both from being a mutant myself, I researched the events, and because I had been told countless stories from those times. My parents had lived through it, with it only ending a mere 4 years before my birth. But the majority of stories came from Brotherhood members, who would come around after my mutation was discovered. Despite the protests of both my parents and myself. I should be appreciative of the Brotherhood. They were the reasons why I had the rights I had as a mutant. I condensed the last part of the lesson to be even with the rest, and reviewed my work. After I was satisfied, I finished the laundry and waded into my various drawers. I went through the apartment on a final inspection and concluded everything was acceptable. I even had enough spare time to think about how much effort I was investing into this study session, before the door opened with the return of my family. "Samuel, guess what?" Mom called out, finding me in the living room. "Turns out kosher isn't that difficult. I talked to one of our tenants, who turns out to be a rabbi. He said no dairy or meat from the hindquarter." "Jews are against titties and asses?" William paraphrased the rules. "So lame." This earned him a light smack from Dad, sending him into a giggle. "Boy, be respectful." I was unsure if the rules were that simple, but I didn't think it would matter much, so long as we got the basics. In fact, lunch wasn't a part of the original plan, but now it seemed to be a cornerstone of the day. It was around 1:45. The table was set, with an extra spot for Samantha, and everything was ready when the entire building seemed to shake under an explosive boom. "The hell was that?" my father yelled, as 2 figures streaked by the windows. "Oh, hell no! Don't tell me some new gang war broke out." "I'm calling the police." My mother was dialing the phone and started to explain when the dispatcher picked up. "Dad, take the other boys and check on the tenants. I'm going to assess the situation." I opened the window, and before my father or mother could protest, I launched myself out and up with the nano-jet propulsion of my backpack unit. I had no intention of engaging whoever or whatever was up there, only record the culprits for the authorities. But when I made it over the roofline of the building, I saw one of the 2 figures was familiar. I landed near the edge and called out, "Dr. Norris, was it? Why are you causing chaos at my home?" The older mutant genius turned his head to look at me. His eyes were hidden behind goggles, but the rest of his face showed the rage that must have been swimming in them. "I am doing no such thing! This one is at fault!" He screamed and pointed to the other figure across the way. I looked and saw a slim and lanky figure with green skin and eyes also hidden behind goggles. An Urkin, equipped with an extra bulky pack unit. This Urkin was an engineer, likely with an array of weapons and tools. At the accusation she leaned back and laughed. "Blame me all you want. Not like you're capable of doing anything compared to me." "Quiet, you bipedal snail!" Dr. Norris screamed as he flailed his rifle about. "Return what you stole!" "Stole?" "As if," the Urkin hissed. I ran an ID scan as she continued. You primitive primates aren't worthy of a sense of property, even with mutated outlier freaks like you. Actually, Mechanic Amp, I addressed her, stepping forward, human beings are recognized as fully sentient by the United Galactic Federation, even when counting only mundane humans and leaving out outliers such as myself and Dr. Norris. Bah! Amp scoffed. Meeting such a lowly minimum doesn't put you on par with the great Urkin race. Irrelevant. My point is that by the very state that sponsors your family, you are obligated to honor the property rights of any human. Quiet, you! Dr. Norris shouted at me. This doesn't concern you. That took me aback for a moment, until I realized the error of my oversight. Dr. Norris would have known the same information as me regarding the UGF stance on human sovereignty. He could have provoked the same threat as I was applying, to call the authorities and let them handle it. Yet here he was. Conclusion? This was personal, which was irrelevant. Incorrect, Doctor. This is my home, and you both are causing trouble. Now cease, or I will call the authorities. Yes, Norris. Listen to the even more mutated freak. Amp laughed. This made Dr. Norris enrage, and he lifted his rifle. To hell with you! He fired 2 shots of plasma, which were stopped by Amp's energy shield. She then raised 2 small pistol-shaped objects, and I instinctively raised my own shielding before the pistols produced their own shots of plasma. Both missed, but it didn't matter. The peace of the moment was broken. I pulled my own weapon and prepared to fire, as useless as it would be. It wasn't a combat model, but rather a defensive design that wouldn't break through Amp's shielding. Luckily, her own arms weren't much higher a grade, as they pulled minimum drain when they hit my shield. Still, it was 2 against 1, since Dr. Norris didn't seem to mind me actually participating in the fight. The exchange lasted only a few seconds before my systems picked up that the police dispatch had been informed. Apparently, so did Amp's system, because she stopped firing at us and scanned the horizon. You freakish apes have wasted enough of my time, Amp said before turning and expanding her jets to take off. She wasn't 100 yards away before a solid beam of water shot straight through one of her wings and past her. She lost control and fell into the city. Before I could make a hypothesis, the source of the attack came up and over the roof edge. Samuel, what's going on? I saw you getting shot at. Are you okay? Samantha landed, stepping off a stream of water that she controlled like it was a solid surface. Fine now. Dr. Norris had just rudely brought his own feud to the top of my home. It wasn't my intention to involve you, or anyone else, Dr. Norris barked. And yet, my domain has suffered duress. I believe I am entitled to an explanation, Dr. Norris. My use of his official title seemed to have softened his demeanor, because he scoffed at me with mere annoyance rather than anger. That Urkin snail stole something of mine, and I am in pursuit to retrieve it. What could be so important as to start a whole fight over it? Samantha smacked the bottom of her trident down. Plenty of things. Dr. Norris walked over to the edge of the roof while he looked at a datapad. It seemed to be scanning the area. I believe my friend was asking for what specifically was stolen from you, I clarified, walking closer. The scan was a calculation on where the thief would have landed, and I would like to repeat the inquiry. What was taken that was so important as to fly around the city engaged in combat? Dr. Norris hissed and closed his scan. She took a databank of mine. I see. I nodded with understanding. Was it at least redundant? Of course it was, he said with gritted teeth. It's still a complete record of all my work, my research, my experiment, my notes on everything. So what? Samantha asked. You aren't losing anything. Wrong! Noah turned and pointed a finger. I'm losing the edge I gained through years of hard work to an alien thief. Samantha just rolled her eyes at him. Whatever, just take your squabble elsewhere. Actually, I would like to assist. I said, drawing shock from both of them. They snapped out the question, "Why?" To put simply, Samantha, this is a big deal. While I believe knowledge should be freely shared, this sharing should be done freely. Taking others' work, even if noble, must be opposed. I then turned to Norris and addressed him, though that is far from the only reason. My scan says she's from the Northern High School, and while I have no ill will or word against the Erkin people, I'll be damned before I let some entitled Yankee get one over on my school. "Count me in, then!" Samantha shouted with glee. Norris didn't object verbally. It was agreed on. We would hunt the thief down. I excused myself to gather my real gear, as we started to form a plan. The shot from Samantha's water attack broke one of the jet wings on Am's custom pack unit, which means she wouldn't be able to fly until she fixed it, leaving her two options. The first option was to fix it, but that required tools, time, and material. She could likely make a patch job if needed, and equally likely had what she needed for such a task. I know I did. The second was to continue on foot, or maybe bus or cab. The Erkins weren't a rare sight to city-goers, but they were still a significant minority. Like any demi-human, she would try to limit her contact with mundanes. Additionally, she would try to limit her contact with any human, given her belief in Erkin's supremacy, leaving her with a very slim and narrow path to take. "Remember," I spoke over the comm link, "she's grounded, but not unarmed. Approach her with full caution." "Ha! I'm not scared," Samantha responded. "She went down easily enough from a lucky shot. She won't be much against a real attack." "Fool!" North shouted, causing a line of feedback to cover his words. "It was the fact that it was a lucky shot that allowed it to even hit. If she had saw your attack coming, you would have never been able to even inconvenience her." "Sounds like you have a high opinion of her," Samantha cooed back after the feedback died down. "It is not that I have a high opinion of her, merely a low analysis of you," Norris fired back, causing Samantha to audibly pout. "You are a first-year rookie, both of you, and we are the highest-ranked seniors of our respective schools. In a direct fight, you lose 9 times out of 9. "I wonder if they teach motivational speaking at school?" Samantha asked. "By my calculations, we should be able to surround her if maintain our current pace," I said, ignoring the rhetoric. "Do you remember the plan?" North asked. "To keep her cornered and let you have the real fun," Samantha summarized. "And don't get in my line of fire," North added. "Roger Dodger," Samantha confirmed before going silent. I scanned the streets below and picked up on the terrestrial riptide that Samantha was traveling on, weaving through the sparse Sunday traffic and ducking through shortcuts when possible. If the narrow tide wave was causing a scene, it wasn't big enough to alert the authorities, at least not yet. Samantha traveled on the ground while I flew above her over the city skyline. Dr. Norris was also flying, but was a distance away, setting up to be the other flank in a pincer maneuver. I opened a comm directly to Samantha. "Are you not enjoying yourself?" "Of course I am. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." "This is a private line, by the way, between only you and me." "That Isaac boy is a grade A jerk," Samantha remarked. "Why does he have to be so mean all the time? I'm fine helping him, but his attitude would be a deal-breaker for me." I smirked at the revelation that even Samantha's near-perpetual cheer had a limit. "You do have to excuse him to a point. On top of the current situation, Isaac also has the compounded effect of his red-toned genius." "Red-toned genius?" Samantha repeated the words as a question. "What does that mean?" "A phenomenon among those with intelligence beyond mortal capacity. Theory goes that in order to run the advanced levels of thought needed to be a super genius, our brains default to a single emotion to express. Which emotion that is said to be the tone of their genius." Red is for anger, like Dr. Norris. Regardless of the stimulation, the majority of his output will be lined with anger. The line was quiet after that for a moment, until Samantha almost whispered, "That's actually kind of sad. Can he feel other emotions? Could I wane through the inferno of his heart and calm his soul? Could love free the beast of his rage?" I sighed out the air at that. Her patience wasn't infinite, but near infinite is still a big number. Don't worry, it's not that straightforward. We super genius still feel all the emotions of normal people. It's all just lined with the tone of our genius. "What's your tone?" Samantha asked. "You're always really calm and unbothered by everything, even above sensibility." Indeed, Dr. Norris really is my opposite. My genius tone is green, for serenity. I answered right before I found the target on my sensors. The Erkin amp was bolting through the streets on a pair of jet-powered rollerblades. A predictable choice for those with lanky legs. I certainly would trade in my scooter if not for my limited stride. We approached the West Bridge over the Potomac that marked the state line between Maryland and Virginia. We were mere yards away from losing the home field advantage. But this was the best spot to enact our plan. Amp must have thought she was in the clear, because she quickened her pace when the bridge came in sight for her. Increasing the output of her rocket-powered skates, she glided onto the bridge, where I gave the signal to Samantha. Now on the bridge, Samantha had the entire river to pull from. And with it, she bolted out from under the bridge, slamming a wall of water in front of Amp, causing her to grind to a stop. Before she could realize the situation, I flew down at her, firing pot shots, as per Isaac's instructions. She caught on quickly, hopping to the edge of the bridge to keep her back to a wall, and started firing her pistols at both of us. Samantha waved her trident and pulled water in front of her to shield her. I landed, increasing the output to my own shields, as I returned fire, causing her shields to flare up. We swapped laser fire, and soon enough Amp fell into a groove of firing at Samantha to suppress her, while she focused more on me. The exact mindset we were hoping for. Now openly in her blind spot, Samantha summoned power into the water wall before her, and concentrated it into points to fire out. A dozen water bullets hit Amp. The first few were direct hits, before she manually increased her shielding to block the attack, which resulted in an overload of her systems. The last hit also sent her stumbling back. She found her footing and snapped her pistols to us, with an enraged expression as the barrel points started to glow for an overcharged shot. She wasn't having fun anymore. "You mutated monkeys must think you're top-notch!" Amp sneered between her narrow Erkin teeth. "Where is that two-bit hack? Got scared and sent his minions so he could lick his wounded pride?" "What's your problem?" Samantha shouted. "Why do you hate mutants so much? I'm not even a mutant, and I know you're trash as so last century." "Idiot! All you humans are just mutated animals pretending to be people!" Amp shouted back, causing Samantha's face to twist in confusion. "She's not talking about the demi-human classification," I provided an explanation. "Rather the fact that humans are the result of the evolutionary process." "Yes! You're all a bunch of apes who got good at bashing rocks together. You'll never be equal to the glory that is the Erkin race!" Amp shouted, like she was gloating. "Oh, well, I'm Jewish, so you're still off," Samantha scoffed and twisted to launch a wave of water forward. "I was made on the 6th day." The wall collapsed and shot around Samantha and Amp. Quickly acting, Amp aimed at the wave and fired both of her shots, sending the wave to scatter and wash over and around her. A whining sound from her pistols said she had overloaded them as well. Her primary offense and defense were both down. She was still far from defenseless at the moment, but that was going to change soon. A perfect time for a quip. "And that's checkmate. You lose," I said right before the finishing move from Dr. Isaac Norris went through. Far back at the city skyline, Isaac was watching the entire fight through a scope, waiting for this moment. He fired his custom shock rocket rifle, sending an electric charge into Amp's water-soaked chest, sending her and her system crashing down. "Nice one-liner," Samantha said, surfing over to me. "It was a bit generic," I noted. "Generic is another word for classic, and the classic never goes out of style." "Perhaps, but Jerry would have made a much better quip." "Like what?" I thought for a moment. "This might be shocking, but you lose." Samantha thought it over for a minute, before donning her smile again. "Nah, I like yours better." "You think this is over?" Amp groaned as she regained her footing. "It's not." "Correct," I agreed. "There's still the matter of the databank. Hand it over." "You want this?" Amp coughed as she pulled out a perfectly black cube from her pack. "You're going to have to pry it from my cold—" She was cut off by a wave of jet-streamed water slicing through the cube, cutting it in two. Another series of electric sparks jumped over Amp, and she dropped the remaining half. "You bedazzled gorilla! How dare you! How dare you! Do you know what you destroyed?" "Something that wasn't yours to whine about," Samantha noted. "Now get gone before we kick your butt just for fun." Samantha's threat was punctuated with an extension of her trident. Seeming to accept defeat, Amp turned and took off into the sky. "Wait, she was able to fly this whole time?" Samantha asked with honest confusion. "Yes, the flight itself was never an issue. It was speed and mobility," I explained, just as Isaac was landing. "Why are you letting her go?" he asked as calmly as he could. "We got the thing from her," Samantha said, posing with pride. "Where is it? Give it to me!" Isaac extended a hand to us, and turned his sight to where Samantha pointed to the two halves. He stared for a moment as he set his jaw into a grit. "You broke it." "Well, yeah," Samantha said. "You said it was redundant. That means you have another copy somewhere. So nothing was lost." "Except for the actual databank, which I needed!" Isaac snapped. "But you said it was redundant," Samantha said with worry. "The data was redundant. The device wasn't!" Isaac shouted. "I was supposed to deliver that to an important client!" "Can the data still be extracted from the pieces?" I asked, trying to de-escalate. "No! It was an advanced quintinium matrix. It required a constant power supply to hold the bits as individual ions, allowing it to hold multiple zettabytes of data." "What's a zettabyte?" Samantha asked in a whisper. "A trillion gigabytes." "Oh. What's a gigabyte?" "A million megabytes." "Oh, megabytes. Megabits." Samantha nodded knowingly, before leaning back in. "How much is a million bytes?" "Roughly one textbook." "So that's..." Samantha did the math in her head and pursed her lips. "A lot." "Yes! Very much a lot," Norris said with a burning gaze. "And now I have to acquire another ingot of quintinium in order to make another databank. And I have to do it before my client loses patience." "Who's your client?" Samantha asked. "The International Library of Enlightenment." "Pardon, but..." I stepped in, now legitimately confused. "Isn't the International Library of Enlightenment library? As in anyone can access the knowledge inside for themselves?" "Yes, it's a massive collection stored around the world that anyone can request access to. I was delivering my yearly donation of raw data when that Irken thief robbed me." "Then why was this an issue?" "I have a supply of quintinium. I have quintinium data drives, though not as dense. We both have friends who could haul the extra mass needed to hold multiple zettabytes easily." "I wouldn't need that much storage. I wasn't donating that much data. A few hundred petabytes." That was the breaking point for me. I straightened my back out, and with hands on my hips I huffed, "Then why would you make such a fuss? My personal pack could hold that." Before Norris could give an answer, Samantha stepped forward with a smiling face. "Because it's the principle of the thing. Like you said, Samuel, knowledge should be freely given and shared, and such a noble quest can't be done with anything but the best. To have such a vile fiend try to hoard the knowledge you give freely is a wrong that demands righting. Such a task requires a virtuous soul. Isaac, I see your virtue, and I'm truly sorry I didn't understand your quest. Could you find the compassion needed to forgive me?" This stunned the super genius, leaving him slack-jawed. He cleared his throat, recovering. "It's Dr. Isaac. And thank you for trying, though I might have to settle for my second-best databank." With that, Dr. Isaac turned and took off, returning to the Virginia half of the city. Samantha watched as he went. What a noble soul. "An inflated ego is all I see," I remarked. "But I guess it is earned." As we stood there, a police officer walked up to us, informing us that we were blocking traffic. Embarrassed, we apologized and made our way back home. "Oh man, what a day," Samantha said, stretching her back at the bus stop as neither of us wanted to use more power than needed. "The day isn't over. We still have studying," I reminded her. "Oh yeah, I completely forgot. I hope there's time." "I'm sure there is. In fact, I believe we'll be back just in time for lunch with my parents." "Oh, good. I'm starving."